It was somehow shocking to look at a news feed the other day and realize in how many places the world is at war or in chaos. And in particular, this feed, it was like the headline was like, "It's Mother's Day." And then everything they said afterwards was, "Women in danger here. Oh my gosh, they're in danger here." Maybe it was on purpose, but it was pretty frightening. There's so much to say about that in some other sermon, but I'm really not ready for it now. And I had been thinking about these three words for a bit. It all started with magic. Magic has such a bad name among the rational. Yet, I think of it as such an important part of our world. Of course, I don't define it as something done by people with star-studded dunce cap, Rowan wands, and faux Latin spells. For most of today's magicians, our hats are invisible. Magic is a practice. I'm going to argue that all three of these are practices, and it is in that the sermon hangs together, as it does. Above all, I believe it is a practice of transformation. We settle our minds on the things we're interested in transforming, and we start our studies and our work. The beginning, as with any practice, is learning the skills. You try things out, you have some successes, you have some failures. You make adjustments. Things seem to work better. You keep at it. It's not yet perfect, but it's serviceable. And then something happens. Something that takes those actions that you've repeated time and time again and elevates them into an entirely different realm. In sports, people talk about moving into the zone. In music, it's when you move off the page into the music. You find that place where your muscles and your mind are finally working together. With a group, it's more about something extraordinary that happens out here, not in here. For us here, I think that magic moment has recently been about love flows. There were a bunch of things that made it and us ripe for transformation. There were people motivated towards social action. We tried this, we tried that, we got some traction. The trip to Staten Island was not nuttin' for a group that hadn't done such a thing before. But it was when the kid angle was uncovered that the project coalesced. Basically, we were using the same skills, our passion for justice, our passion to make a difference, to be known for caring, ignited and allowed huge strides to be made. When the project worked, we got energized, and we grew, and so did the project. For the past year, we've skated a bit on what we did before, but still, we're making headway. Not huge, maybe not with the impact and that force we once did, but it's steady. On the one hand, we're still doing good, and we're cheering for those who are getting their work furthered and their children fed. On the other hand, there's still lots to do. I did a lot of work this year, and a fair amount of it was not very successful, or hasn't been very useful yet. And I did a lot of work on my own, so there wasn't the friction, if you will, to catch that spark. But that doesn't mean the project is failed, my work is useless, or that we can't take this up a level. Things are still getting done. Why, just Friday, while waiting with the kids, I ran into Van Wagner and I said, "Van, blah, 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 project, will you write me a song?" He said, "Could I? Well, all right, okay." But the need is still great, and there are still people who care. Do we care enough to do more magic? Are we ready to move from journeymen, women, to adepts in the feeding of hungry kids? We'll have to see. We're never going to be a social service agency, but we're in position to be leavening. I'm convinced that what will take us to the next step is a group of folk focusing on the next idea. Last summer, Alan Marchiori asked me whether children get fed on weekends during the summer. The answer to that question is still no. Is that something that starts us moving? We'll have to see. If we're going to take magic seriously, we'll have to start the practice. My cousin and I, Doug, had a question last weekend. Doug's a Quaker. He was relating a conversation he'd had with a Mennonite in reference to Earlham Seminary. It's a Mennonite Quaker seminary. The Mennonite had said to him that the Mennonites were all about worship and the Friends were all about prayer. Huh, said I, as much to myself as anyone. Pooh being the favorite family philosopher. So, what are UUs about? And as I've been thinking and writing, I realize that I believe that we are practitioners. We have 7 principles. We learn them and we put them to use. We inform or even leverage our activities by our beliefs, but it is our covenant that shows us as faithful. It is our principles that shape us, if we let them. I think I mentioned the last time, this is a show and tell, wait. I mentioned the last time that I had been working on a meditation on the principles with help from Lenore and a bunch of other people. We now have a prototype of a 7-week, they're just like the Koan cards. You open it up, it's welcoming, then there's 7 cards on welcoming. Next is kind and considerate. There's 7 cards. They're in the same rainbow colors that the rainbow that they are assigned so that kids can help remember. So I'm really excited. It's tangible. I know. And so Lenore and I were talking, and Lenore made this fabulous little box, and she was saying, well, what would we, how would we package this, and what would we do? And I said, well, if we ever really get these going, and they say somewhere on their thing that this is one of the first things that comes from the Joseph Priestley Press. But I said, yeah, we'll ask Dick Bonham to make us a die for a box that has a chalice here in the center if we get that going. So that would be really fun. So. Come on, you got to work for this stuff. But I keep looking for ways to keep deepening my association with principles, looking for ways to become a more principled person. It is my application of these principles in concert with you that our magical skills catch fire and something happens, something, I think, magical. So what does music have to do with this? I've been reading, I don't know anybody else, but if you've noticed, there has been an explosion of articles on music, on singing, on what happens in your brain when you sing, what happens in your brain when you play, and all these things that light up. It's pretty clear we should learn to play some instrument, never too late. You may light up my life, but music lights up my brain. And in the long run, it's music, not you, that will keep me from dementia. Much as I love you and just saying. Music uses us. It's amazing to look at the studies of brains on music. The more complicated it is, the more brain we use. The more places things are etched into our brains, the more we remember. Hope and I had so much fun at the nursing home singing with our elders. And people kept trying to hand out papers to them and say, here, sing this. And so people kept going like, what page am I on? What page am I on? But if you took the pages away and you started singing, they were right there. They had all the words to songs from the 40s, to songs from, World War I. It was great. And Mom and I sang our heads off and our hearts out and laughed a lot. I sure hope that someone will come and quaver with me should it come to that. I want you to know I still know a lot of songs from the 40s, so start learning them now. Maybe the choir could start a project. Right. And then we start singing with other people. All our vital signs come into accord when we sing with our neighbors. If we want to live in peace with people who are not like us, we need to start singing together and keeping rhythm together. It is so easy and effective. I can't think why we don't do it more often. It actually works when we listen to music too, so keep playing. We'll keep being moved. This is exactly why when Steve and I married, we put money into drums and a not-for-profit called Peaceful Measures. It didn't get very far. I'm not a good enough musician, nor am I a neurologist, and Steve is also not an organizer. But the truth is right there. Guy Carawan, the man credited with bringing We Shall Overcome to public attention during the civil rights marches, was warned by his folklorist mentor not to introduce music as an agent for change because the Nazis had used music so effectively during World War II. But at the Highlander, where race has always been worked on in interracial groups, they had no such qualms. If something is true, then we need to be judicious in how we apply it rather than burying the truth. And we need to figure out how to use this talent for good. Now, it's also true that Guy took a very earnest white bread version of this to Highland. There's a videotape going around about it, and some young black singers said to him, "Man, put down that guitar, white boy, and let's sing us some song." And so now what we know is a lot closer to that song rather than a four-square melody, because astonishingly, he was smart enough to listen. As I was walking out of the house today, I had this memory of, which was really deepened by the Chopin you played. A friend of mine, I did a program in organizational development, and it was one of those touchy-feely California programs where you went out and spent time with each other and hung around in groups. We did a lot of guided meditation. And it was also a program that you didn't need a college education to start, a master's program, that they would work you through all of the stuff you had to do and get you to a master's. It was an executive program of some sort. And in this program was a young woman who had grown up in the hills of North Carolina. She had walked out of those hills, out of a holler, with a brush and a change of underwear in a paper bag. So she's probably my age, I think, maybe a couple years older. And she got a job as a chambermaid at Holiday Inn. By the time she got to that program, she was an assistant vice president. So she had been working her way up the ranks. And at one point during a guided meditation, one of our profs put on a classic piece. I don't remember what it was. And while my neighbor was falling asleep and snoring, she fell apart. She had never heard anything like that in her life. She was used to the harmonics of church singing in Appalachia and to country music, and that was all she had ever heard. And she had no idea what kind of beauty could exist in that song. And her life was transformed. It was an amazing thing. And so we need to know. We are, unlike a lot of UU congregations, a singing congregation. There are a lot of enthusiastic singers in this crowd. I've never been with a group of people that will reach back and pull out words to an old song like you guys do. Actually, I tried this in Lancaster, and except for Wayne and Kitty, they all looked like the RCA Victor dog. Singing makes us lucky, and it makes us happy. And you have good song leaders. How many years is this as our song shepherd, Dee?
I lost track. I have no idea. Probably since 96.
Yeah. That's 20 years next year. Party next year. You better check that because we wouldn't want to give you an extra party.
Okay.
And you're making the goodies, right, for your party? Oh, yeah. Right. Sorry. But we're willing. Our hearts are trained to go to the right place. And when this happens, Sitting up here, I watch you. Everyone exhales and smiles, even if you're not singing. I know this. I'm watching. But if we wished, we could take what we enjoy and make it work for the Valley. I had another meeting with Larry Lawson the other day, and I talked to Van Wagner. I've got to get back to work on that song fest, but I think about, all of, like Shamokin. Shamokin is a terribly downtrodden place. What would happen if there were a choir there again? There used to be choirs, they're minors. They sang. Does it change life? And those, out of those choirs came unions, came kids being taken care of, came schools, came all sorts of things. Those are things we could do. And do in concert with other singing groups in this area. Doesn't have to be on us. But because if the articles we're seeing carry actual scientific fact, no conversations about agreements should occur before singing has happened. Because that would bring our hearts and minds into the same place. There should be a peace in creating good accord song, because sung words carry more weight than spoken ones. This is an area it's pretty easy to move toward. We could do something if we wanted. In the meantime, sing. Sing anything. And one of the things they did when they got in the bus today, on Friday, all the kids had to take off their earplugs, and they put one tape in, and they were all going in the same bus on the same song, which was great. And then mysticism. If magic was a hard word here, mysticism. That willingness to fall deliberately into wonder. The agreement to wait on an answer, whether from without or within, that acknowledgement that we are exquisitely alive. There are not a lot of UU mystics alive today. But why not, I wonder? For certainly going back into history, there are. But for so many of us, it seems almost distasteful, certainly unknown. And I have to say that any piece of this that I did on the West Coast stayed there or got sent back there when there didn't seem to be a big interest here. But just the other day, my friend Stephen Kent, who I've talked about, who plays the didgeridoo, sent me a piece to listen to on his birthday. He's working with a new band that's an interesting grouping of musicians and the music ranges from Sufi chant to new wave Aboriginal music. But the chant is done by a man who has a 600-year history of vocals. He's Pakistani, and his family has been singing and has a singing tradition for 600 years. What if we began to think of ourselves as a singing church, that sang, has sung since, and I'm sure you did. Did you sing at the beginning? Yeah, I'm sure you did. So, what if that became part of our identity? If we began to think of that as part of our identity? What songs are important to us? It's one of the things that I know when I went to see Kitty and Wayne, one of the things they were asking for, because their mom is aging, and, it's yet another project Lenore and I talk about, and I'm really going to have to lean on a lot of you, but we need iPads that are filled up with meaningful readings and songs to sing, so that if we go to visit somebody in a hospital, and they're in a coma, or they're, we have no idea what to say to them, and we're sitting here like this, we can go wait, I have something by Pooh I should read to you. Or I have something by Wadsworth I should read to you. And so how do we gather that together? But the minute I heard Stephen's piece start to play, the trance was so seductive. And I thought, where is this mystical tradition in UUism? It's true, we have so much we have to do. There's so much injustice that must be righted. But to go to that place where one is exquisitely in the moment, aware and alive, is something we might want to consider. If our path is one of being a practitioner, is there room for that? Goodness knows there's enough injustice. Wait a minute. But if we're going to ask ourselves over and over again to stand on the side of love, might it not be helpful to work at ways to keep ourselves whole? because I don't think faith is all about earnestness. And if it is, it's really boring and sort of, you know, you don't want to talk to people who are just earnest about their faith. You want to talk to people who are enlivened by it and excited by it. Let me just say I have no idea what I'm suggesting. I don't know what the UU path of mysticism is. I love that we're working on yoga and labyrinth and, you know, meditation cards and all of those things. I love that. And I'm not always sure for myself. I'm not good about giving myself that time. I found it interesting that I was asked to speak at my nephew's wedding, and I was asked to speak on Quaker silence. As I said to them in my introduction, that I thought it was really trusting of them, since I was A, not a friend, and B, known more for the quality rather than the quantity of my silence. But all the research I did about it with this child's parents and with other scholars pointed towards that mysticism. Silence, within the context of meeting, provides an opportunity to quiet ourselves and to listen. To listen to, or perhaps for, that still small voice, or the deeper truth. Perhaps to listen to the voice of the divine, or to the soft touch of possibility as it ruffles the edges of the emptiness. I found more about the intimacy of silence and the waiting on the other, or even the self. There's a lot there. Are we ready for this? I don't know. And isn't that the great thing? We may not have to know. But we might want to consider whether or not we want to cut this possibility out of our lives altogether. Wonder what opportunities we might miss with ourselves. What might it be like if that moment of silence were actual silence? A moment not so much of reflecting on what we heard or looking up the next hymn, but rather of waiting on what we might know. What if we let it continue a bit? What if we suspended disbelief and walked the labyrinth month after month? Does it work the first time? For some people? For others? No, it's the practice. What if we did yoga movements or sat Zen? What might we learn? How might our lives grow? Are we missing anything? Is there possibility in the world that we're not exploring? And do we care? Blessed be.